Having gone through high school and the college admissions process myself, I now have a first-hand experience of the toxicity of the college admissions process, and it's honestly kind of depressing. And so today we're going to be talking about the elements that I've noticed in the college admissions process that make it so toxic. Number one, people doing activities for their resume. With the increasing competitiveness of college admissions, it's becoming seemingly impossible to land an acceptance from top 20, top 10 schools like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Brown, and many more. To put this into perspective, the number of college applicants has nearly doubled since the 1970s, while school sizes themselves have changed very little. Which, if you put two and two together, there are much fewer acceptances that colleges can hand out as compared to the number of applicants that they're receiving each year. And so these statistics are overall causing students to feel like they need to cure cancer simply to get accepted into a college in general. And because of that, I feel like a lot of students are engaging in all of these activities not because they actually really and truly enjoy them and are passionate about them, but because they feel pressure to do so to even have a chance of acceptance. And then as a result, some of these volunteering hours, nonprofits, businesses, activities in general just become almost superficial. And I feel like the lines between true passion and feigned interest are starting to become even more blurred than ever before. And it's to the point where I think that even students themselves aren't really sure where the facade ends and their true interests begin. And the second thing that makes college apps and the college admissions process increasingly toxic is the competitive nature of college apps in general. Because if you really think about it, you're essentially competing with your friends in this seemingly never-ending race to gain acceptances from various colleges across the nation and perhaps even globally. Obviously, you and your friends probably aren't going to be applying to the exact same colleges or have the exact same college list, but I feel like that there's this idea that subtly lingers at the back of your mind. The fact that if you and your friend are applying to some similar colleges or some of the same colleges, you're essentially going to be fighting one another to get that acceptance. And I'm not saying that that's always going to be the case, because there are certain colleges and certain institutions that will accept more than one student from each high school, but there are certain competitive colleges that don't do that. And for some colleges like the Ivy League institutions, they typically tend to accept one or two students max from each school, unless of course that high school is a feeder school. And again, I just want to emphasize that this is not always the case. There are going to be certain circumstances where even if you're applying to the same colleges, that doesn't necessarily that you guys are each other's competition, or that because one of you gained an acceptance, the other can't. But I've just noticed that that is becoming a trend where it can cause some tension when both of you are applying to the same schools and that school historically has only accepted one student from each school. And I feel like this scenario has becoming more common than not. I actually had a friend that told me that at her school, the valedictorian and salutatorian were best friends. They had been best friends since the beginning of high school, but they got into this huge fight because the valedictorian found out the salutatorian applied to one of the schools that the Val wanted to get into, and that had been her dream school for the longest time ever. And I will not be disclosing who these people are because that would be a violation of privacy, but essentially the Sal ended up getting accepted into that school. And then obviously when the Val found out, she was like, what the heck, man? You didn't tell me you were applying to the school. I thought we were sharing everything with each other, because that's what they'd been doing, and the Sal kept it to herself, and it just kind of damaged their relationship. And I think that's something that shouldn't have to happen, but unfortunately does happen in certain circumstances. And to some degree that can't be avoided just because of how competitive it is. Everyone is fighting to get this chance into the colleges of their dreams, and when you have two friends that are fighting for the same opportunity, it can be just as difficult. And the ironic thing is neither the Val or the Sal told each other they were applying to the school, so it's just kind of a double-edged sword. And that kind of story, and that's not an uncommon kind of story that I've heard of friendships being weakened because of the college app process. And obviously that doesn't happen to everyone, but it does happen, and that's something that I do think that makes the college admissions process somewhat toxic, more than it needs to be. I wonder how those two are doing now. And a third thing I've noticed is how subjective college admissions process is. More often than not, your chances of admission is essentially relying on whether or not the college admissions officer is having a good day when they're reviewing your application. If they're tired or not, did they get enough sleep? Are you their last application that they're viewing for the day, or are you the first? It's very up to fate, up to destiny almost, and I don't really like how it's so sporadic and random. I'm sure that lots of people have talked about this concept of how random the college admissions process is on social media platforms and just in daily life. And honestly, upon reflection, I just don't think that's how it should be. And I do think that it's important that to some degree, some sort of standardized approach is implemented, because otherwise the subjectiveness is only going to hurt students' chances of gaining acceptance. And there are instances in when that can be a good thing, but I just don't think that relying on whether or not the college admissions officer is having a good day or not should be a determining factor of whether you're accepted or not. Like, obviously, if you're a stellar candidate and you've won lots of competitions, have an amazing resume, amazing stats, even if the college admissions officer isn't in a good mood, that won't completely destroy your chances. But in certain situations, students may get rejected by the college admissions officers due to factors that can't be necessarily quantifiable, factors that aren't really tangible. Sometimes it's just that gut feeling like this student isn't the right fit, but at the same time it's like, who are you to say that this student isn't the right fit? And I know that they're looking at things holistically and that they're really considering each applicant and who they are and other things that they include in their application as a whole, but I think sometimes it can be very difficult to kind of draw the line and separate what's like truly holistic and what's just simply the subjective opinion of an admissions officer, because that varies from person to person. And I know that sometimes that they do have multiple officers look over an application, but I just feel like that's not always the case, and sometimes there's just that one admissions officer that goes through the applications the first round and then kind of like removes certain applicants, and I feel like that process within itself is flawed. And obviously there are flaws in everything. Even if we're doing standardized tests and solely based off like one test score like they do in some Asian countries, that might not necessarily be the best way and most accurate way to represent whether a student is a good fit for a school or not. But I do think that there are adjustments that probably should be made to maybe make the college admissions process a little less subjective and sporadic, and in that way that might be able to ameliorate the toxicity and the inherent unfairness of the subjective nature of college admissions, if that makes sense. And if you really think about it, the college admissions officer are typically spending like 10 to 15 minutes reviewing each application. And I've seen multiple videos in which college admissions officers themselves are admitting to this. And I guess my question is, how can you truly understand an applicant, who they are, and whether or not they'd be a good fit for the school with just 10 or 15 minutes? Even if you're going on a speed date, I feel like you should at least dedicate half an hour, maybe more, to get to know the person. I don't know, just like from my perspective, I feel like that's not enough to really wholly assess the application. And I do understand that there are lots of applications that they need to sift through, and because of that, they have to kind of like shorten the amount of time they dedicate to each one. But I guess that's one of the other flaws that I think that I see in the college admissions process. And so the final thing I want to talk about is the inner toxicity that comes with college admissions and college apps. I feel like a lot of the times students can be very harsh on themselves because rejection is hard, and the whole application process is just kind of like building up the tension, stacking up the blocks until your stress and your anxiety and your tension and everything is just so high that you're just done. And I don't know about everyone else, but I definitely felt that way. And it was just very tiring and gruesome process. Although I do think that because I was able to plan ahead and kind of work out everything, I was less stressed than some people. But I just feel like overall, like the process can be very stressful. And then when all of the decisions are rolling in, you might start to feel a little bit of self-doubt and like feeling like you're not good enough when you're getting rejected from these colleges that you really wanted to get accepted to. And it's just that kind of like questioning your self-worth, and it's really hard, and you might start to feel like you're not good enough. But I think just like bringing it back to like, there are going to be lots of things in life that don't necessarily always go your way, but just like other things, college admissions does not define you who you are. You shouldn't define yourself and your self-worth based on whether or not you were admitted or rejected from a school. And at the end of the day, where you go is kind of like where you're meant to be, so you definitely shouldn't let that put you down. And if you take anything away from this video, I hope that it's that. So I guess just like overall, there are a lot of things that can be kind of toxic about the college admissions process. If you're going to go through this, are going through this, or will be going through this in the future, I just want to promise you that you will be okay, you will survive, even when things become really tough and you're just feeling really tired and drained. You can do it. You're an amazing person, and no one ever said that life was going to be easy, but you got this.